Good evening or afternoon, everyone, wherever you're at right now. How's everyone doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing excellent, doing excellent. You know, it's crazy because I get off of work, I've got 30 minutes, and then I hop in here. And so
Wow.
I'm like, yeah, got it. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I can totally say it's not the right time for me, but I'm okay with it. You know what I mean? So
Right?
yeah, I'm good. I'm still in that, little hustle mode, if that makes sense, kind of thing.
Does.
What about you, Janae?
I'm great after that intro. It gets me pumped every time.
It does, right?
I
Yeah.
appreciate that because I spent some good time on that, and I had some excellent reviewers, i.e., my wife and kids, help me, make that a little bit more shorter. So,
I love it.
yeah, thanks. So, everyone, I'd like to welcome you. If you're joining us tonight, this is our second official episode of the Cybergangsters Cybersecurity channel, and I have been in the IT world myself for about 20 years now. And I'm transitioning into cybersecurity this year, specifically in the PCI realm. And so what I initially thought was a way to help me gauge how well I understand PCI and what I can grow and learn in. That's what my YouTube channel started out as, but now it's growing into I want to help not just myself, but others out. And I'd like to interview folks who have specialties in PCI because I realize that there's not a lot of content out there. And I want to help contribute to that content, which is where this channel came from. And so I paired up with Janae to help me out here. And I found Peggy Nolan on LinkedIn, and she has been fantastic on there. I've been able to talk to you a couple times, Peggy, and 2 or 3 times. And I'm always like, man, I feel so relieved when I talk to Peggy. I don't feel so alien to the field, even though I am. But I don't feel that, if that makes sense. And you do such a great job at helping people, in my opinion. You've helped me feel not as tense, maybe is a good word, about it, but very realistic at the same time. Yeah. And so I appreciate that about you. So with that, we thought, why not ask her to come on and share with everyone her experience? And so part 1 last week, she did about report on compliance, or ROC as we call it. And today she's going to wrap that up. And then if we have time at the end, we just want to ask you a bunch of random questions, if that's okay with you. Awesome. Sure. Awesome. Excellent. Sure. So with that said, we got a lot of people who are already commenting in. Let's just let a few people. So we got Jose here. He's saying hi. We have some random user. Hello. I'm sure we'll find out later who you are.
I like those random users.
Yeah. And here we know who Fancy Flamingo. He's a good friend of ours. He's here tonight too. Wally's here. Hey, Will's on here doing great. We need more.
We need more PCI. Yeah.
And you know what? Honestly, so that's what Peggy does. I feel, Peggy, that's one of your niches and things like that, is you also contribute. I see your LinkedIn posts all the time, and I'm like, man, you're spitting fire all the time.
Yes.
I saw your video last week. It was great. Thanks, Fancy.
Thanks.
Steve.
Hey, Steve.
So we got a lot of people coming in. They're going to keep swarming in. So that's fine, guys. If you have questions throughout any of tonight's interview and broadcast, feel free to answer or post them up. If we see the question is relevant to what Peggy's talking about in the moment, we'll bring your question on so that she can answer to it while we're on that topic, instead of waiting later, because we might forget, oh, what was that question related to, maybe, or something like that. Make sense? So what we'll do is, Peggy, you gave us some good content last week about the ROC. And by the way, I attended your session yesterday. I was like, I'm gonna double dip into Peggy's knowledge pool.
Double dip, triple dip, quadruple dip. Yeah. If I'm a firm believer in repetition.
Look on LinkedIn, and you can find Peggy will host some webinars at times and free events, and she posts so much knowledge. Make sure you check her out on LinkedIn, follow her, connect with her, and I don't remember if your company is separate or is it all under your name?
So the company is separate. Okay. Sometimes I feel like it's under my name, but it's not. Payment Card Assessments is a separate entity. We have a page for it. And both Lisa Cressy, my business partner, and we worked together for almost 11 years. We will answer questions together on our business page as well.
Okay. So yeah, and we'll make sure to put the links to the business page and Peggy's LinkedIn later and throughout tonight. So don't feel like you need to leave and go check that out. We will make sure to put it in here.
Pay attention.
Yeah. I will also make sure to post it in LinkedIn for mine and on my YouTube so that you guys can make sure you can reach out to Peggy and all the resources that she makes available just as easy. But for tonight, focus on here and right now, and let's give our attention to Peggy. And Peggy, if you'll go ahead and take away, we're just going to ask you, you're going to talk, and then we'll just ask questions as they come up and things, okay?
Yeah.
Awesome.
I love this platform. Thanks for having me. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Peggy Nolan. I'm the CEO of Payment Card Assessments, LLC. I started this company 2 years ago with my former coworker, Lisa Cressy. Hey, Lisa. There she is. She's on. We started this company because we really wanted to be able to help other merchants and other people who were in the PCI field with all of the hows. So we want to teach merchant organizations, service providers. We want to teach their compliance staff. We want to teach them how to do PCI compliance. We together, Lisa and I, have over 20,000 hours of in the trenches experience at a level 1 merchant, a Fortune 100 company. We did this day in and day out for a little over 10 years. So we've got the bruises to prove our experience and our expertise in PCI. All right. So last week we got through the first part of my presentation on how the art of delivering a report on compliance. So I got through the 5 biggest mistakes most organizations don't even know they're making and how you can help them avoid them. And what I'm going to go into now is the 4 core principles that Lisa and I embodied and we followed. And once we adopted these core principles, our PCI compliance became a little bit easier, a little bit more effortless because we had a foundation. And so I'm going to go over these 4 core principles that anybody can adopt. And it works not just for PCI, but it works for anything you're doing, any program you're running, any program you're part of, whether it's cybersecurity, IT security, whether you're working in a hosting environment, the cloud environment, it doesn't matter. You can adopt these principles. All right. So the first core principle is super important when you're running a program. Begin with the end in mind. It also works if you're running a project. And there's a difference between a project and a program. Does anybody know the difference?
Want to take a stab first, Janae?
Yeah.
Sure. Go ahead. Take. Huh?
Okay. Yeah. The project would be short term, and a program would be something that you would adopt. So a long term.
Close. So,
okay, close.
Jaime, do you want to take a stab at it? Janae's
I'm
really close.
I'm going to say a project is an introduction or like it's like gathering all the teams and people necessary to introduce something new. And then the program is what sustains it in the long term. That would be my thought.
Together, you're both very close. A project has a beginning date and an end date. That's it. That project can take 10 years. It has a beginning date and an end date. Say, to get a man on the moon took it 10 years. Big project with many projects in it, right? A program is something that is continuous. It's always ongoing. All right. So, all right. So one issue that organizations have is they treat PCI as a project rather than a program. It's a program. It never ends.
I agree with that statement wholeheartedly.
Yeah,
that's
very true. As a project manager, that's what I did for, 25 years of my IT security career was project management. So all my projects had beginning dates and end dates.
Right. And that makes sense now that I'm thinking about it. Because like whenever I interacted with a lot of project managers, now I'm seeing that and I'm like, yeah, because a project manager, it's not like they stayed with one project and it was always and forever.
No.
You know, it was like they have this project that they're working on, then they have this project, and each project had some sort of length of time. Now that you have cleared my mind on it, I'm like, yeah, this was a year project, this was a 2-month project, this was a 7-month project, but they were all different and had their things. And I remember when a project would end, they were like, okay, we are going to hand this over to the program director, or, you know, whoever's going to be taking care of it here on out.
Correct.
So thank you. Appreciate that.
You're welcome. So one of the things that you can do with a report on compliance is treat a report on compliance like a project. It has a begin date and an end date. But you do it every year, right? But every year, treat it like a project. It has a beginning date and an end date. But your overall PCI compliance program is a program. It's not a project, right? Because your continuous activities feed the project.
Yes.
Okay.
So the program is always, the PCI program for any organization should always be going. It never ends. It's always
never ends.
But the project for compliancy, that should be
for your assessment.
Assessment should have that start and end date.
Correct. And you need that.
Okay.
Right. Because there's several things that are going to tee off certain dates that you have for your assessment period.
And these core principles, was this something that you fostered on your own and came up with? Okay, I was just curious. Awesome.
Nice.
So a lot of this comes from personal development work that I highly recommend everybody do anyways, right? Because we want to be better ourselves. Yeah. So I'm going to start with the very first core principle, which is begin with the end in mind. And if you're familiar with Stephen Covey, this sounds very familiar. And I think this comes from seven habits of highly effective people. One of the core principles is to begin with the end in mind. As a project manager, former project manager, and a program manager, begin with the end in mind. What is my end goal for a report on compliance? It was to get that thing across the finish line, to get it signed and submitted, right? That was ultimately my end goal. So I always needed to go, okay, so I'm going to start with, when is my report on compliance due to the acquirer? Right? Begin with the end in mind. When is it due? What's my due date? And then I have to work backwards from my due date.
Okay. Does the acquirer state a due date like all the time, most of the time, or?
No.
Okay.
I'm going to teach you a few tricks about that due date. So it's an annual event. So say I submitted June 30th of 2022. That would have meant my 2023 ROC was technically due June 30th, 2023.
Correct.
So I did not tell you this. You get a 90-day grace period.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay. All right. Use it wisely. Don't broadcast it to everybody like I just did. No, you get a 90-day grace period.
Okay.
So something that's supposed to be annual, which is 12 months, is actually something that can happen every 15 months.
Okay.
So if you're so I just want to say something. If you're a really good PCI quarterback, and I'm going to get a little football analogy in here, right?
Right.
You play your 2-minute clock and you use it to your advantage. Especially if something has gone wonky, but you can fix it within your grace period.
Yes.
And get it done, right? I'll give you a really good example of how you would want to play your grace period. And MasterCard has already signed off on this one. So you're doing your very last version 3.2.1 report on compliance. And you have it in QA on March 31st, 2024. It's gone to QA. All right. So it's in QA with your QSA. QA means somebody else needs to take a look at your report on compliance and how it was written up by the QSAs that did the assessment. It also means you have to do internal QA. So once it comes out of the QSA's QA, you need it. And you need to cross-check everything for accuracy as well, because let me tell you, copy and paste errors happen all the time. So you need to check it yourself. all you have to do is tell your acquirer, you can leverage that 90-day grace period that the card brands are giving for the last submission of version 3.2.1. So what this means is if you get it in QA on March 31st, 2024, now you're game clocking this. All right.
Yes.
You're the quarterback. All right. If I'm a
Right.
quarterback, I'm going to use my 90 days.
Correct.
And I'm going to submit to the acquirer in June.
Makes sense. So then you have that extra buffer to get ready for the new.
Yeah.
I like that.
So you need to play the time clock. Now I know there's going to be some people going, wait a second, that's not right. No, it is right. I'm playing within the rules. Play within the rules.
I'd be like, you do you, boo. You do you. Okay.
Right. It's when you go outside of the rules that you're not behaving appropriately. You're not acting with integrity, which is another core principle that I'll get into. But you know what? I'm going to play within the rules, and I'm going to leverage those rules to my benefit. Just like the 2-minute drill. 2-minute drill. Tom Brady knows how to play the game clock. There's a bunch of other quarterbacks that know how to play that 2-minute warning, and they will drag it out, and they will get their 45-second timeouts as, and 2 minutes becomes another hour.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So I'm going to take my grace period and I'm going to use the whole thing and I'm going to submit it at the end of June 2024.
So, okay. Peggy, so the way I just understood you is once we are completed with once we're ready for our first QA with our ROC, we actually are going to give that to the QSA for them to review.
No, they've put it into QA. They have declared that so you're working with 3 QSAs from QSA firm A, right? They're done. They have finished assessing the last week of March 2024.
Right.
Okay. They're done. They now push it into QA. Their QA.
Theirs. Okay.
Takes 4 to 6 weeks.
Right.
All right. It can be shorter. It can take longer. Depends on what happens, right? Because
they're completed.
Yes. When they're completed,
then it comes back to us like if we're the
your own internal QA.
Right. Okay. And then we clear it 4 to 6 weeks again.
Yeah. I play my cards for another month and a half.
Okay. And then after we clear it, is that when signatures?
That's when it goes to signature.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Speaking about timeframes, so when would you recommend to start looking for your QSA? How long do they, when should you start looking to hire who you're going to have come in?
Well, if you know when you're supposed to have something due. So under optimal circumstances for a complex environment, a report on compliance can take anywhere from 6 months to 12 months. So you need to be looking for your QSA at 6 months before your start date. And 3 months before the start date, you better have a statement of work.
Okay, so the statement of work, that's basically like the contract that we want from a QSA.
Yeah.
Or as a QSA, we would provide to our client.
Correct.
Okay, and that states everything that we plan to do in the time frame, so that's part of the budgeting process too, right? Like all the budget is encapsulated within that.
Correct.
Okay.
And you want to be able to also make sure, and this is something I learned, this is a lesson I learned after the first report on compliance that I did, is make sure that you have an overage bucket.
Yes. And I remember that from my project days when I'd help other projects where we'd be like, here's everything what we have, but here's that little extra bucket for the time.
Yeah, you need an overage bucket.
I appreciate that.
I love that.
There's a question from Hector. So that grace period, if used, would be our new ROC due date for the following year. Yeah. So if I submit my report on compliance, my last report on compliance for version 3.2.1 at the end of June 2024, June of 2025 becomes my new de facto due date.
Makes sense.
Interesting. So your potential for your due date every year could be different by 3 months. I mean, if you're taking it to the maximum amount of time, it could be different by 3 months every year.
It could be.
Okay,
Great.
all right. Good question.
Yeah.
Lisa
And
says
if you have
their QA is built into the time frame of the ROC. Oh, okay.
It is. But I'm going to get into. So I have a lot of things when it comes to planning a report on compliance.
Sure.
One of them is you have to build in 4 weeks of QA time. So for the QSA's company to do their QA. But I also tack on 2 weeks. So I tack on a total time of 6 weeks
for the QA.
Makes sense. Okay.
For the QA QSAs.
4 weeks for them, at least 2 weeks for internal.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Yeah, you don't want to sell yourself short on that because again, copy and paste errors. They don't mean to, but they do it, and they'll copy and paste from somebody else's ROC into yours.
Right.
Oh, that's what you mean.
Yeah.
So you're reading this and you're like, what? What about bubblegum? We don't sell bubblegum. What is this?
So it's kind of funny. Lisa and I have done a QA and going, we don't use these documents. Where do they come from?
I'm curious.
This is somebody else's ROC.
I just have to ask, is there been one that you just you're kind of what in the world? What was your strangest copy paste where you were
just finding documents that we had never used.
Weird. I would just
who's doing this? And
so
then
when you say confidence level,
I did call out a QSA for fudging, and I'm like, this is not wrong. Why'd you write this up this way?
Huh. Good to know.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
That's good.
So remember, especially if you're a seasoned ISA, you probably know more than the junior QSAs that are working on your ROC. So that's what you have to be careful of.
Okay.
And we all start somewhere.
Of course.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing, right? It's not a bad thing.
I was like a deer caught in the headlight when I got my ISA, and I went, now what? Oh God.
Because you were the first one, right? They transitioned you into that. Yeah. So I can imagine so.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. I thought about quitting every day.
Don't say that.
Ask Lisa.
Well, you're not working hard if that thought doesn't come across your mind a few times in a year at least, right? So yeah.
All right. So you want to begin. Let's get back on track.
Okay.
You want to begin with the end in mind because your due date is going to influence all of the activities, and it influences your start date and then all of your pre-ROC activities. You have pre-ROC stuff you have to do before you kick off, because if you kick off without your pre-stuff done, the QSA is on the clock and they're just twiddling their thumbs waiting for you. When you kick off, you want their queue ready to go and ready to be assessed. You want everything in their queue as much as possible. Now, there's some things that can't get in their queue until you start the ROC, because that's the interviews and real-time observations.
Yes.
Can't do that before you kick off. You do it during the assessment period. But there's a lot of things that you need to do before the start date.
So
and
depending
on how much you've already done, if you can do an end-to-end scope assessment, I always say give yourself at least 30 days. But if you've never done one, give yourself 2 months.
Okay.
Oh, that's good. Peggy, knowledge, that's just gold right there, because that's the practical stuff that we don't learn a lot about, the timing wise, even if it's off a little bit, right? It's kind of I have a buddy. He's like, I can't come up with an original idea of my own to save my life.
Nothing new's ever been written anyway.
So. Yeah, but he's always like, I can poke holes in your ideas all day long, so keep bringing the ideas to me. So, not to say you're bringing back any ideas that need to be poked holes in, but if we don't know that type of information, that
none of this is taught anywhere.
Exactly.
This is full of hard knocks.
Thank you. And with that, Andre has a question over here.
Sure.
Real quick. He says, based on the fact that 2025 would be the new due date for the ROC, how would this work if version 4.0 is effective that same year? Yeah. So this would be a question that only happens during transitional periods.
It does happen during transitional periods. And let me tell you, it took us 18 months to go from version 2 to version 3.
Oh
wow. Okay.
All right. And looking back, going from version 2 to version 3 was easy. Version 4 is not going to be so easy.
Yeah, not so easy. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks, Andre. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah. And what happens when you know that you're not gonna use up all your runway and you need extra time?
Right.
What happens is you submit you talk to your acquirer. So you have to cultivate a really good relationship with your peers over at the acquiring bank. So their compliance team, right? Because your acquirer is responsible for your compliance.
Okay. Makes sense.
Okay. So
the acquirer is responsible. So if you look at the most recent court case, which the Fifth Circuit came down in favor of both Chase and Visa, because Visa sued Chase. Chase is the acquirer. Chase then sued the merchant, Landry's. And Landry's countersued, and the judge basically laughed at Landry's and said, sorry. 20 million, thanks. So they had to pay a 20 million fine for non-compliance.
Compliance is no joke, people. So let me just tell y'all, for those of us who are already in the field, and then those of us who want to get in the field, like there is some legitimate ground for us to stand on in getting in this field and proving, or not proving, but really stressing to people, to organizations, why we are needed as professionals is because
absolutely.
You know, pay me 300,000 a year or pay 20 million.
Right.
I'm just saying.
So for some companies, though, 20 million is a drop in the bucket. Just look at T-Mobile and how many fines they've been assessed just for data breaches, and look at their profit line. Their profit line is in the billions.
Yeah.
So they're $1 million fines here and there. They're $30 million fines for data breaches and stuff like that. It's a drop in the bucket. They budget for it.
True. Jeez. They could lose customers, so.
Yeah. I'm not a T-Mobile customer. I won't be either.
Not
to knock T-Mobile. I'm sure they have a great service, but they have been fined. But when you look at what they're not going to go out of business paying that kind of fine. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
What's our second principle?
Well, we're not going to beat the dead horse on begin with the end in mind. Just know that loads of activities key off that end date. Right. What your target date is. A lot of activities depend on that date.
Okay.
All right. The second core principle. I've got a lot of do's and don'ts with this one. It is act with integrity. Not just you running the program as the ISA, the compliance sustainability program manager, however you are on the PCI compliance team, act with integrity. And you also want to make sure your QSA embodies this core principle as well. Not saying that there's somebody I know that doesn't. I have met really good QSAs out there. So, all right. So a couple of do's and don'ts. Ready for this? 1, don't sweep your broken controls under the rug. Don't try to hide them.
Okay.
Don't try to make them go away. They're not going to go away. As a matter of fact, if you try to sweep a broken security control under the rug, it's going to just have a snowball effect. Okay. So don't sweep it under the rug. Don't hide it from your QSA. You don't have to. There's no reason to. You want to form a partnership with your QSA. You might edit what you say to your QSA, but you're not going to keep it a secret.
Yeah. Right? When you say broken security control, do you mean like if I'm supposed to be, passwords are supposed to be expiring after 15 minutes, or not expiring, but lockout screens, and they don't? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
So, or it could be, you had 36 servers stop logging for 90 days. Why would I sweep that under the rug? That's a big problem.
Yeah.
And it's a big control failure in requirement 10.
Because if you sweep it under the rug, then they probably want to dig deeper, right?
Well, see, the problem with sweeping things under the rug is you don't want your QSA to find out you have a broken control. And we're going to catch that in a moment. Okay.
Okay.
You want to find your broken controls, right? And that is where the continuous compliance program comes in. You want to be able to pinpoint what's working, what's not working, right? Fix what's not working. So what you want to be able to do is assess what's broken. You're never going to keep a PCI environment clean. Things break all the time.
True.
Servers stop logging for whatever reason. Okay. You could have wonky firewall rules that have been on the books for 3 years and nobody's used them. And then somebody goes, wait, do we still need these? Right? And those unused firewall rules could actually impact the security of the cardholder data environment. You could have something happen like this. You get vulnerability management reports that come out, and the reporting comes out of a CSV file, for example.
Right.
Somebody hides a column in the CSV file. Kind of an important column.
Right.
It tells how long the vulnerability's been in the environment. Okay. So what you're getting in the reports, you don't know that somebody's hidden a column because you're just getting the output.
Right. You don't see it. Okay.
You don't see it. And then you have somebody poking around the CSV file and unhides a column. And all of a sudden, you've got 15,000 aged vulnerabilities in your cardholder data environment.
Jeez.
Oh, boy.
Wow.
You have a major problem.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to assess what's broken, create a plan, right? Is your plan going to take you past your 90-day grace period?
Right.
To fix it. Because if it is, you need to stop the ROC.
That makes sense.
Just stop. You can do this.
Yeah. What does that mean? Stop the ROC?
You just stop assessing because you can't make the deadline. You're never going to get it because you have this huge problem you have to fix.
And then hopefully your relationship with your acquirer will give you leeway.
You have a off-the-record phone call with them. Now I'm telling you a true story.
I felt true. I'm like, this seems real.
It's very real. I stopped a ROC in 2019 because we were about 8 weeks away from the actual due date. And the problem was going to take 8 to 10 months to fix.
Wow.
I was way out of my runway, and I just said, now we're stopping. We're done.
That gave me goosebumps.
Yeah. So I stopped it.
Like, this is like, I can't even comprehend at my level right now what it means to stop from either side of the fence. Like, if you're the auditor, you're like you can't submit nothing. This is not like your school test, right? It's not like where you submit the work you have and you'll get graded on that. It's got to be all or nothing.
So a ROC is an all or nothing proposition. I can't submit something that's only halfway done.
Okay.
Right? I even had a manager ask me, well, why can't we just keep assessing? And I'm like, no, you have no concept. Evidence has a shelf life.
True. Very correct. Yes, that is correct.
My evidence has a shelf life, and it is from the beginning date of the ROC to the end date of the ROC. That's it. That's the configuration settings. Those are the real-time observations. Those are the interviews. They're only good for this period of time.
Right.
So you stop.
What's the impact afterwards?
Yeah,
do you get fined? Does the
No.
company get upset with you and we're going to find someone else?
Nobody got upset with me. As a matter of fact, I was told in my review, hey, that was a hard call to make, but you made the right one.
Here's the question I'm trying to ask.
And Lisa's still okay. Hang on. What I'm getting there, Gene. I promise.
Okay.
I promise. We're going to get to the next step.
Okay.
But Lisa's on. She knows I agonized over this decision for a week before I played all my cards.
Cool.
I sat with it for a week. I tried to think of every which way since Sunday. Can we get this done? Can we get this done? No, we can't. Not when they tell me 8 to 10 months to fix it.
Wow.
And I've been in situations like that. I kind of understand from an IT perspective when we've had a project that we have going, and I've been in them where we've had months in it, and then all of a sudden there is this crazy issue. Could be because a certain piece of software isn't compliant with new Windows, whatever the new version of Windows is, and it's like they don't plan to issue an update for that, and it's like, holy geez, all of our stuff, all this piece of information is relying on that software, and in the span of 1 year, it's going to be non-compliant anymore. But they don't plan. Now we've got to look for and shop for a new and get everything, and that's a project on its own. So I kind of get what you're saying. It's like, geez, but in those scenarios, I've never had this part of the field in play. The PCI piece. So
yeah. So nothing happened. No, nothing happened. So there was a little extra work that I had to do on my end, but it was not a big deal. I had to fill out a prioritized approach document. But before I officially stopped it and said, okay, and I had a conversation with our CISO, I had a conversation with the lead QSA, who also told me on that same day that he was giving his 2-week notice. So I just sat there laughing my butt off because I'm stopping at ROC and I've got my lead QSA leaving in 2 weeks.
So the reason that you did the prioritized approach tools, because then you would be a new company that's coming on to being, what am I trying to say, assessed? Is that why you started there, or what is?
No, that's what you have to do if you're not going to make your dates. You have to do a prioritized approach document. Because then your acquirer uses that document, sends it off to the card brands to get the waiver of fines.
Okay. I always thought you used that for like a new company.
Or a waiver. I was looking for the word suspension. It's actually called suspension of fines. So I had a conversation with my lead QSA, who also gave a 2-week notice.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then I said, I emailed my peer at the acquirer, and I said, I need to have an unofficial conversation with you.
Oh, okay.
You're like, off the books, please. So
this is off the books, but I need to let you know what's going on, and this is what's going to happen. I need to know what steps you need me to take, so I can have all of my ducks in a row as best as possible. And then we're going to have a formal conversation with you with our CISO.
Okay.
So that's how I played it out. Now, when it came down to it, I'm not going to lie, it also bought me a little extra time because Lisa and I had done some automation work, right? We were bringing PCI compliance into a little bit more of an agile methodology, and we were using a tool. And the way we first built it, neither one of us liked it. I hated how we built it, and we did it together. So I hated what we did.
I remember you talking about that. Yep.
Yeah. And I said, this, I feel like I'm back for a 1-for-1. It was like one requirement piece of evidence. And that's how we originally set everything up. And I said, no, can't happen this way. How do we bring this in so that I've got parent-child relationships with my requirements? And we make it easier for both the QSA and the system administrators. And so it gave us the time to gut our system and rebuild it the way we wanted to. So when we kicked off the 2020 ROC, we had everything lined up. Everything was teed up for the QSA to come in. They hit the ground running. We finished. We had our work in QA within 4.5, 5 months. And I played my runway. I used my runway because I committed to Visa that we would have the report on compliance by August 28th of 2020. We were done by the end of June.
I see what
So
you're saying.
I used my QA time. Used my QA time. That was the year we saved $100,000, 12 weeks of time, and the QSA didn't like that we saved $100,000.
I was about to say, wouldn't that mean a reduction for their fee?
They didn't like it, but our senior director did.
Yeah, hopefully you got
So we were pretty proud of ourselves too. So,
Wow.
so use your time wisely. Again, all right. So again, back to acting with integrity. You play within the rules. So if you're not going to make your deadline and you're not going to make the runway, first you have to discuss amongst yourselves, come up with a plan, right? You're going to assess what it is, start the plan to fix it, and then come up with your communication plan. How are you going to communicate everything?
Okay.
To not just your internal team, but the QSA and the acquirer. So if you do have things that are broken, again, I've never met a PCI environment or a cardholder data environment that's stayed crystal clear and clean and pure all year long. Have never met one.
Yeah. Okay.
I've never met one.
It means you're kind of stagnant then, right?
Huh?
It means you're kind of stagnant as a company then, right? Like you should always be evolving and changing. Yeah.
Well, see, the reason it can't stay pristine and clear is because you have servers that end of life. You have software that needs patching. You have all kinds of things. And so you have the human element. You have people involved in your cardholder data environment. So it's a double-edged sword, right?
Yep.
People still continue to be the weakest link in security.
Always. I was listening to the breach report from Verizon last week, for example, and it was like staggering the percentages of the breaches that happen based on the human element alone. That's where majority is. Yeah.
And the bad guys are counting on us to be burnt out and overwhelmed and very distracted.
And their tools just took an upgrade with AI being made more available to everyone. And now not just ChatGPT, but what is it, Worm GPT now, that is used specifically for nefarious reasons. And people don't realize now those emails that we used to get that sounded and looked a little odd or whatever, not anymore.
They're not looking as odd as they used to.
They're going to sound legit and more professional now.
I got one recently from the U.S. Post Office, and I looked at it, and all of the links on the webpage didn't go anywhere. Like, I thought, this is weird that they would send me this, and I just clicked on the links to see what it did, and it did nothing. And I'm like, man, getting good.
Yeah.
Jeez.
All right. So you have things that are broken. It's always best if you can come up with your own plan. But if you don't have the knowledge and the expertise, you're going to be leaning on your QSA there to help you come up with a plan to fix things and whatever. Just know that if they do any consulting with you on a broken control or a comp control or any kind of control, they can't assess what they consult with. All right. We all get that, right?
Yes. That goes back to the requirement about having, you got to have not outside organization, but
just a different QSA.
Yeah.
So usually the lead QSA would do the consulting part if we needed him or her to do that. And the other QSAs that were assigned to our report on compliance would just assess.
Okay.
They wouldn't consult. They would just assess. And some of them, I was happy to just assess. Never talk to my CISO.
You're a good assessor.
You're a great assessor.
Yeah.
Stay there.
Perfect. Likewise, it's not your QSA's responsibility to create a comp control or to create anything for you. That's your job.
Say that again for the people in the back who couldn't hear.
It is not your QSA's responsibility to come up with comp controls for you if you can't meet a requirement. It's not their job. They can consult and advise, but it's not their job to create it for you. It's yours.
Okay.
And again, perspective as an ISA or PCI professional in the organization that's charged with the audit from that side, not specifically not the QSA. Not the QSA person.
So the people who are going to come up with the comp control, say you need a comp control because Active Directory still needs to use a lower level of TLS because you have legacy debt.
Okay.
Okay, well, you're not supposed to, because there's requirements that say you can't do that. It's no longer considered strong cryptography. So you have to come up with a comp control, because you're kind of Active Directory is a huge shared resource for a lot of organizations.
Yeah.
So you're kind of, you got to do something. So you have to come up with a comp control. The organization, the entity, needs to create it. And that type of comp control is usually additional monitoring and alerting. So every time it gets accessed in a certain way, there's an alert that gets created. And then somebody has to do something about that alert to say, yes, that was authorized. That was authorized traffic.
Okay.
So
something like that. And then you just run it by your QSA. Hey, this is what we're doing. We good? Yep. All right. That's comp control. And then you have to follow the write-up in Appendix C. There's a lot of work in a comp control.
Yes.
Comp controls are not sustainable. They're usually more costly to do rather than just being able to do the defined approach. It's going to cost you more money. And it kind of puts a damper on your continuous compliance program, because most comp controls are manual.
Okay.
That's great.
Yeah.
I appreciate knowing that too. That's a lot of information within the compensating controls that come up. For the longest time, I didn't understand compensating controls, Peggy. I was like, it just does not make sense. It took a little bit to understand it. It took more to really grasp. I couldn't handle why would an organization even create a compensating control? And it took me having to find compensating controls is one of those things that I was hard to find examples of and understanding more out there in the internets. Okay. I know, because I was hardcore trying to figure out compensating controls. And then it finally just took a whole bunch of people in one meeting, 1 hour. I just had to hear everyone's understanding of it. And then for whatever reason, it clicked. And I was like, I got it now. Now I understand it, but it was terrible to get to that point.
It is hard to understand, because when you look at the defined approach for how you're supposed to meet the security requirements, they're not hard. All right. But when you have a vendor, say you have an appliance and the vendor says, here is the password. This is the password. So it's a vendor supplied password.
Not supposed to have that.
Yeah.
And it gets shared with the system administrators. So we're now into do not share your password.
Right.
So you have somebody has half the password, the other half. So your system administrators that must use this appliance, doesn't matter what it is. It's for security.
It's the coffee machine. That's always going to be the coffee. I'm just playing.
No. Sometimes it's a vault.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
It's a vaulting system. And you get the password from the vendor. Your system administrators keep half of it. The other half is stored in the vault. That's a compensating control, is storing the other half in the vault.
Wow.
And then keystroke logging when you have to access the vault to get the other half of the password.
Jeez. Yeah.
You have to jump through some hoops for that comp control. That's a real comp control in a real scenario.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did you have a question, Janae?
No, I just thought that was really interesting. Comp controls kind of scare me. Yeah, well, I don't know why, but just...
we usually carried, I think we had 6 comp controls total that we carried. Some of them never went away. The Active Directory thing didn't go away. It maybe has gone away now that we're gone, but probably not. As long as there's legacy tech debt that can't use the higher level cryptography, you're kind of SOL.
Yeah.
So comp control.
Yeah. But, I appreciate this, because I feel like every time I hear an expert talk a little bit more about it, there's more pieces to this puzzle that I didn't know existed. And it just clears it up more and more, right? Like, I previously understood why an organization would use a compensating control. In my example, for example, earlier about maybe a legacy piece of software, that all the data was stored there, and they just do not want to upgrade because they don't. The possibility of losing all that data is tremendous to them. So they end up saying, let's encapsulate it into this new software that is cryptographic safe. And the way we access the old data is now encapsulated in the new software, and that is compliant. And it's like, okay, you met the goal. So I understood it that way. But hearing this part, like, for example, so far what you've already said, and I don't know if you all out there are catching it too, but QSA is not responsible for creating a compensating control. That makes I was so confused on that. I had asked questions about it in the past, but the questions never got answered correctly. This is the first time I've actually heard someone say QSA does not create them. The part, oh gosh, I'm gonna have to rewind now because I forgot the other part that I was thinking of. There's just so much going on. But anyway, the point is that just learning that how compensating, that they're more expensive, that they're more manual labor.
Comp controls are definitely more expensive. You usually have to jump through more hoops because a comp control is above and beyond the requirement.
What the requirement is. Yes.
Yep.
So, and I knew that part. Yes. And so, and the part you said about the sustainability of it, it's not intended to last forever.
No.
And it can't be. You do not want to keep a compensating control in place year after year after year. And to me, when I think about that, I'm like, that's like asking for something bad to happen.
It is asking for something bad to happen. So some of the things that I recommend for this, right? If you have to like have say you have a security operations center and you have to do a comp control that requires them to do more work, right? Because they have to monitor this comp control and they have to alert every time it gets pinged because it's being invoked or used or whatever. They're going to hit you up. They're going to hit up the ISA or the PCI compliance program manager and say 6 months down the road, are we still doing this? Why are we still doing this?
Yeah. Yeah. And then, and you know, it's funny how it works in the corporate
expire
world.
This use case?
It's funny, right? Because you're like, you approved that. And we told you it needed to be adjusted, but then you're like, you know, they just, and this is my experience. I'm not saying this is everyone. I'm just saying in my experience in the IT corporate world here, it's too much to do at the moment. So let's initiate a compensating control. And then when we review it in 6 months, 3 months, whatever time frame, it's like, why are we doing that? You're like, you didn't want to spend the money then to do it. We were already spending the money to have the audit done. And it's like,
right.
Well, we're spending more money. You're like, we knew that 6 months ago. We said it, but okay, we'll work on this next.
Controls of all key point. Yeah.
So, you know, the security operations center that I worked with for a long time, when we implemented a comp control, they always wanted to know, when do you think this will expire?
Good to know.
Like that.
So you want your comp controls to have an end date, and going forward, you're probably going to need to have your risk assessment teams are going to do more work going forward in version 4.0 because you're probably going to have a targeted risk assessment done at least on an annual basis, depending on the comp control of, hey, is this comp control still effective? So they're going to get a little extra work too. So a couple more don'ts and do's and don'ts with acting with integrity is the biggest one and you'll hear me talk about this one all the time, is don't skimp on scope.
Yes.
If you sweep some of your scope under the rug, you're in trouble. You're going to be in trouble.
Okay.
Yes.
That's why it's so important to do that end-to-end scope assessment prior to kicking off your report on compliance. And oh, by the way, it's now going to be an annual requirement in version 4. So you have to do scope. I don't think the requirement goes far enough when it comes to scope because it's more than just the technology.
Right. People.
It's your people, it's your processes, it's your third-party vendors. It's very soon in 2025, it's going to be all the JavaScript. If you have your own homegrown billing application and you use Java, you're going to have an inventory of your JavaScript.
Ooh.
Yeah. You'd be surprised at the things that you need to have done in a scope assessment. Like you need to have a complete listing of all your in-scope networks and all your out-of-scope networks.
That's pretty sure that's everything that's included, isn't it? That doesn't include that, yeah.
And the reason you need a listing of all your out-of-scope networks is because when you do a pen test, guess what they're going to pen test from?
That list.
That list. They're going to pen test from your out-of-scope networks.
Yeah.
To validate your segmentation.
Get off Java, folks. Just a little side note there real quick. If you're in a corporation and you're still using Java, get off quick, okay? Jeez.
Yeah. So you're also, you also need to keep an inventory of your applications. And in many cases, what you'll have, this is the environment we came from. We had our own billing app, but there were 26 or 27 billing apps that redirected into an iframe.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And that's what kept those 26 applications out of scope until 2018. Then they became in scope for patching. Mm-hmm. And that's not in a report on compliance. That came out of the SAC-A. So anybody who had an e-commerce environment, that SAC-A new requirement for patching those servers that redirect.
Explain that again. Say that one more time. I want to make sure I understand that.
So organizations that have their own billing app, they will probably have an iframe or do some type of redirect, because you'll have all kinds of financial applications that are going to redirect into this one little payment blob. Right. And we all know what it is because we do it when we're on Amazon. We do it when we're buying something online. That thing that you type your credit card number into is probably not part of the actual page you're seeing. It's an iframe.
Right. Yeah. Usually you can tell because when that window pops up, you'll see a gray bar sometimes on the little window, and you'll see like what looks like another URL. It is a URL, and it's a web page redirecting.
Yeah, but they've gotten really smooth with them, so you don't actually get another page that pops up. It's an inline iframe. So it looks like you never leave the page that you're on.
Slick, man. Slick.
So you have a bunch of financial apps that redirect into this one inline thing, right?
Yeah.
Inline iframe. You use the iframe to keep them out of scope for PCI. Right. That's, I mean, there's a whole guidance documentation on this. But because in 2018, they made an update to the SAC-A. And if you're familiar with the SAC-A, it's for e-commerce and telephone orders.
Right.
So they made the update there. So any company that was a level 1 merchant doing a report on compliance was caught unaware that this update was made, because why would you ever look at a SAC-A?
Wouldn't. Right. You wouldn't.
You wouldn't.
Right. That doesn't apply.
Right. That is when a good QSA will pull you aside and say, hey, guess what? Did you see this? It now applies to you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I never would have looked at a SAC-A. Why? I was a level 1 merchant.
Right.
Interesting. Well, okay.
Thanks for that, Peggy.
Yeah.
Telling you guys, lots of gold nuggets being dropped when Peggy talks. Like, I appreciate just the clarification on so many things. And, anyway, I want to be respectful of everyone's time because we are hitting that 1 hour time. And Peggy,
we're already there.
I know.
All right, I'm going to blow by these ones really quick.
Okay, that's cool with me.
The third one, the third core principle is plan the work the plan, adjust as necessary. If you don't have a plan for your report on compliance, you are planning to fail your report on compliance. Okay. Right? I have a report on compliance planner. I also step through this entire thing that I'm going through. It's a course. The planner is available in the shop if you don't want to be a subscriber, but for subscribers to the Resource Center, all of this material, plus all of the checklists and all of the documentation that you want to get your hands on, it's inside the Resource Center. So you want to plan the work the plan, adjust as needed. I have never not adjusted something.
Okay.
But you can't adjust if you don't know what your plan is. You're just flying by the seat of your pants. All right. The fourth core principle, and this is where the rubber hits the road. Stop overcomplicating your PCI DSS compliance program, period. Keep it simple, stupid. The more simple you keep what you're doing, the better it is for everybody. There's no reason to add complexity to something that's already complicated. So read the defined approach for meeting your security controls and implement them. They're not hard. Most of them are process related. And then once you have the processes in place that are repeatable, then you automate. Keep it simple. The simpler it is, the easier it is for the QSA to assess, and the easier you're going to make life for your system administrators who PCI, they're just going to give you a big fat eye roll. Right?
Okay.
They're already overwhelmed. They're just trying to keep the lights on. PCI is a big overhead for them.
Yeah.
You have to make it easy for them. You have to make it simple. Sometimes it's not always easy depending on what tool you decided to use to help secure your cardholder data environment. So the simpler it is, the better off you are.
Yeah. And it's not like you can just not, and I don't feel like you're throwing the idea that everything just needs to be simple, but making whatever is there simpler for folks. And that makes sense. That makes sense.
So there's some things that you can do to avoid unnecessary complexity. You want to be able to reduce scope whenever and wherever possible. Right. So where it makes sense to reduce scope. So the biggest one that you want to start off with is if you don't need to store cardholder data, don't do it. Don't store it. Don't. You're going to make requirement 3. If you have to go through the whole thing, it's a nightmare.
Wow.
And if you have to do key management and you've got 3 system administrators, each with separate roles and responsibilities for key management, and they're sitting on an interview and they're like, well, I'm really not sure who's supposed to do what.
Oh.
Key management's not easy.
Yeah. Not at all.
Okay. If you don't need to store cardholder data, don't store it. That's the first way you want to de-scope. Okay. You also want to make sure that you have isolated your entire cardholder data environment by following the definition of network segmentation. It has to be completely isolated. And the way that you test for that is through 11.3. It's your pen test. And so that's why you need that list of out-of-scope networks, because they're going to take the out-of-scope network and they're going to try to jump in.
I see. That makes sense. I didn't quite get that. Okay.
And if you've done it right, they can't get in.
Interesting. That's exciting, I'm sure. Yes. Did it right again.
Did it right again. Can't tell you how many times you can do it wrong.
When you say, and I know we're going over, but Peggy, when you say de-scope, sorry, I'm kind of hung up on that because in my mind I'm thinking honestly, let's just be honest. Either you are a level 1 merchant who is dealing with, over 6 million transactions, and the idea of de-scoping that or off-siting it to a different organization of any kind, that seems pretty monumental. But even if you're any of the lower merchant levels for that still seems like such a huge and tall order. Have you successfully been able to recommend it to organizations, and they did it that were, really honestly, any of those levels? Did it end up well for you?
So if you think about what a SAC-A is, a SAC-A is for e-commerce and telephone order only, and only if you've outsourced it to a third party.
Okay.
Maybe
I'm overcomplicating that. Yeah, maybe.
Oh, you're so the thing is a level 1 merchant, Lisa can attest to this one. For 7 years, I pushed a rock up a hill. De-scope. We need a third-party payment provider. Why are we doing this ourselves? Why haven't we outsourced this? Our acquirer has a solution. Why can't we use their iframe?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
There's also solutions to descope your call centers. Call center activity is call centers can wreck your life at work.
Yes, definitely.
Especially if they're multi, you know what I mean? Like they're handling business for multiple different organizations.
They can, and if you don't have the right things in place for call centers, they're just a pain. They're a pain.
Yeah.
They make PCI just, you grit your teeth and you eat lots of cookies.
In my history, like I've said, so one of the more challenging interactions that I've had with auditors was in the call center environment. I didn't work like on the floor taking calls, right? I was at the corporate side dealing with everybody's IT issues. And so it was like, oh my gosh, we got to do this to this certain, to Verizon's computers. We got to do this to the hospital's computers. We got to do this to the internet cable companies' computers and all this. And it's like, it is a cornucopia of.
Yeah.
Call
centers can be there. They can be a challenge. It can be a challenge. And there are ways to descope the calls, the credit card number on the call. Some of them are more expensive than others. You can use, there's a tool out there that will do it will do it online. It's like a dynamic keypad. It descopes part of it. It descopes the call center agent and their device, but it doesn't descope voice over IP in your back end.
Yeah.
All right. And we all know that if you have a call center and you're using voice over IP is hard to segment.
It really is. Yeah.
And the
voice that means your whole network could be in scope, maybe. Just depends on how things are done.
Yeah.
DTMF is another way to descope, which is dual tone multi-frequency. It's a really cool thing, but it is expensive. So you just have to weigh the cost benefit for it. Many organizations don't. Some love it. Others are afraid of losing out on the customer experience. So you have to be aware of that customer experience, because our customers are our lifeblood.
Right.
They don't want to sacrifice the customer experience. You just have to be careful there. Then there's also, point-to-point encryption. If you use a device that's attached to your laptop or whatever, and you type in the credit card number over that, that is one way to descope it. But that itself also brings all kinds of other issues, like you have to keep an inventory. There's all kinds of things that come with that solution as well. So you just kind of have to, there are ways to descope. If you're using pause and resume in the call center, pause and resume, because calls are recorded. Okay. And you can get credit card data captured on the call recording. There are systems that use pause and resume, but pause and resume has a notorious failure rate.
Yeah, I was about to say.
30% of your calls will go through with credit card numbers on it.
Jeez, that's a lot.
So you just kind of have to be careful with how you're descoping a call center. But
for those of us an experience in that, it's not always going to be about what makes sense from an auditing perspective.
Right.
Like we may feel that pressure, like, hey, we've got the ultimate thing. This will help you. Why would you not choose it?
Why would you not do it?
Yeah. And that makes sense from just that pure logical standpoint. But we do have to remember is that, just like Peggy was saying, the organization doesn't have just that concern that they're thinking of. No. I know one of the questions I've seen a lot, Peggy, come up, Janae, she and I have both seen this, is people always are wondering, like, what's the pushback? How do you deal with the pushback to some of the, addressing some of the requirements and the compliancy to the requirements? And this is one of those things, I think if we can learn earlier on that just because we have the PCI answer, it doesn't equal having their answer, the organization's answer.
So, and also depending on, the bottom line of a company and how much money that company is bringing in.
Right.
Descoping may not make sense at all because they're okay with the costs of keeping things as they are. That it's a drop in the bucket. That what I would consider very practical, which is descope this, and you're going to save. You're going to cut back your assessment 80%. You're going to save 80%. Your assessment's now only going to cost about $50,000 because you're going to NA out a lot of requirements.
Wow.
Right? You could do that if you're like e-commerce and call center only, right?
Right.
I'm not talking about a traditional retail store. That is a whole nother ball game because you have your point-to-point encryption devices and all that good stuff. And so those are the 4 core principles. I know we are at an hour and 11 minutes. What I want to do is just say, does anybody have any questions?
I appreciate that.
I have one question. How do you manage not feeling overwhelmed? Like, do you feel overwhelmed a lot, or have you just learned to go with the flow and you can only do what you can do? That's my question.
So there are days if you're in the middle of a report on compliance, or if you're starting one, there's a bell curve, right? It starts out like this, but then as soon as you start assessing, it starts to go like this. But then it comes back down when they're done assessing and you're done interviews and you've done the real-time observations, and then it goes back to a flat line once you get into QA. So there's a bell curve. All right. Here you're fine. Here you're okay. Here you're not okay. You're not okay up here. Okay. If you have somebody you're working with, you're usually on the phone with them all day crying. This is hard. I never want to do this again. This is awful. How do we make this better? And you make a mental note. I need to bring this up during the retro. This isn't working. Usually for me, that top of the bell curve was right when I was, we had to do, 60, 70 interviews and real-time observations. So we had 30 technologies that were in scope for PCI. So if you just think 30 technologies and you have to do interviews for access controls, that in itself is 30 interviews. Okay. Every system administrator needs to have an interview just for access controls. And then, oh, by the way, in requirement 2, there is an observed system administrator securely logging on that you got to bring that into that interview. And a couple of other things that like cleanup on aisle 9. I've got some other requirements that this system administrator needs to be interviewed on. And then combine them. So I have a consolidated interview and observation schedule for version 3.2.1 that's in the resource center that anybody can use it. You'll save 100 hours and about $20,000. But at the top of the bell curve, because I went to every single interview, I scheduled them and I went to them. And the reason I went to every interview, and if I couldn't go, Lisa went. There needed to be a buffer between the QSA and the system administrator or whoever was being interviewed. And I was the one who kept the meeting on track. I would tell the QSA if they were out of bounds on the interview, that the interview is strictly what is in the meeting. And if it's not in the meeting, it's either a separate interview or I will schedule another call. But we are staying inside this boundary. And if I had a system administrator come to an interview, knowing that he was supposed to have his system ready for real-time observations, and he forgot, I did in the interview. Don't waste my time and don't waste the QSA's time. You need to come prepared. Every single one of my meeting invites always said, you will be asked to share your screen. You need to have your system ready, and these are the requirements. I also prepped all of my system administrators before they interviewed with the QSA, especially the nervous ones.
So being more prepared helped you not be as overwhelmed with your kind of, you think?
Well, it would help the system administrators, but me as the ISA, I was always up at the top of the bell curve. And that was usually because when you're doing interviews and observations, you probably have another QSA that's also assessing evidence.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like the height of the report on compliance, and there's a lot of activity going on at the top of the bell curve.
That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
There's so many questions you're making me think of right now, and I can't ask them all, but I'm thinking like, so what's the average length of the bell curve, the height of the bell curve, for X amount of organization, 2 weeks? And then what is entailed in that? Is it just the interviews mainly? Is it that rough time?
It's everything that has all just like all comes together. And there's really no way that you can avoid it, because you have to do the interviews and observations. You can tee everything else up. You can have all of your evidence teed up. But at the same time you're doing interviews and observations, there's a lot of evidence. We used to have like over 500 pieces of evidence, documentation and evidence. And if you have 3 QSAs working on your team, you've got 1 QSA that is on the calls doing interviews and observations. You have 2 others that are assessing. So you as the ISA, now, do you need to be on every interview? You know what? No. But I was a buffer. Yeah. And I always considered myself the buffer, and that I disliked if the QSA thought that they could just contact the system administrator on their own. I say, you can't have a conversation with the system administrator without me or Lisa present, period.
I'm in charge. Okay.
We're in charge of this. And if we haven't scheduled it, you don't schedule it. I do.
So if you're not go ahead, Jenny. Sorry.
I was just saying, it's just about ownership, period.
It is.
You should.
The QSA does not own your report on compliance. You do.
Got it.
So whether you're an ISA, so I feel like the terms that I hear a lot, we're talking about the key roles here, a QSA and an ISA. By the way, that was, I love that part of your presentation yesterday. If y'all, whenever you see Peggy's next ROC presentation that she posts up, attend it, because there was stuff that she got to show that we haven't been able to show, which is fine. But there was this page this is when I joined in, was the key roles and
responsibilities.
No. Yeah.
There's one responsibility for a QSA, that's to assess you.
That it was gold. I was like, oh my gosh, look at that. But I appreciated it. It just helps fill in some gaps that I didn't know existed, or that I just had preconceived notions about, or whatever. So it was just extremely illuminating to see just to see how the roles are further defined and what to expect on the job. And, I say that, Peggy, because, a lot of the people who I have from my own channel coming and watching us, a lot of them are learners. A lot of them are new to the field or looking to get into the field and do it. So I know that, and I will say I am someone who researched and plowed my way, not quickly, but thoroughly, to what I could. So even learning some of these things, it's like, man, if I'm glad I'm hearing them. Let me just put it that way. So
good.
Yes. I do want to be respectful, and I could keep talking. And I'm glad that I found someone like me, because Peggy can keep talking too, and Jenny and I can just keep listening. And I'm sure all of you do too. But we do want to be respectful for everyone's time included. I don't want to burn Peggy out mainly.
No, you're not going to burn me out. This is. I'm in my element when I'm teaching.
And I'm glad. So with that said, are you wanting to come back for a part 3 next week, or do you need some space?
So I can come back in 2 weeks. I have my adult children are coming to visit for 10 days, and they arrive next week, and I get grandbabies coming from Ireland and Denver.
Aww.
And
my daughter's horse trainer, she just came back from Ireland because she's looking to purchase a horse or some from there.
Yeah, my oldest daughter lives in Ireland.
Okay.
So I have 2 grandbabies that are in Ireland. And so I'll be in Ireland for the 2023 European PCI community meeting.
Oh, that's right. You mentioned that. You did.
Yeah, okay. You can actually go look at the agenda. I'm in the last panel discussion on the last day of the conference. So Thursday, October 26th, I will be in Dublin. I'm part of a panel that we're discussing why having an ISA on staff is vital.
I'm gonna watch if they show that somewhere. I need to watch it and memorize it so that when I get placed, I can be like, look, here you go. Here's why. So
here's
what I want to do right now.
So I'm a huge advocate for organizations having a team of ISAs or PCI-Ps, or at least having somebody who can explain PCI to the rest of the organization, because when you don't have that, all you have is just a mess without a clue.
And you know what?
And you're at the mercy of your QSA.
Yes. And I hear that often. I hear one of the main things I hear from people who are in the world or in the work is they're like, my primary job, honestly, is just communicating PCI to people who are communicating to their groups.
Right.
They're like, that's mainly what I do, to be honest. So it's just a communications job.
Well, not during a report on compliance. That's not what you do. You are eyeball deep in assessment work.
Okay.
And again, a good ISA is going to assess evidence before it gets kicked over to the QSA, because there was nothing that I hated more was when the QSA said, what did you just give me? This doesn't work. And I'm like, what the heck is that? And why did I do that? And I'm like, oh, no, that was a mistake.
Yeah.
I assessed before it went to or Lisa assessed too. Lisa, even though, I was the ISA and she ran the continuous compliance program, she didn't have ISA after her name, but she knew PCI inside out and backwards.
Maybe Lisa will want to come on next week in your absence. And Lisa, you can talk about continuous compliance in Peggy's steed for next week. Let us know. But someone asked a question, and I'm going to pop that on the screen.
Sure.
And then I want to give you the full screen after you answer them, and just share whatever message you want to share with everyone else. We'll say goodnight to you, and then Janae and I will just address everyone for a minute, and then we'll end tonight. So Chris is saying, does having a PCI-P credential position you well for a job?
I didn't have one. No, it doesn't. Unless the job description is specifically asking for a PCI-P. Like you'll find PCI-P requirements if you're looking to work for a QSA, but you don't want to be a QSA. They need people who do the QA. PCI-Ps can QA a report on compliance for merchant organizations that a QSA is done. So that's a good example of where a PCI-P is useful. They're also incredibly useful for companies that do payment application work. Maybe they create the payment application, right? There are companies that do that. There are companies that are trying to help merchants descope. Having a PCI-P on your staff or on your sales team, on your marketing team, that's huge, because you understand PCI and you can actually talk to QSAs and ISAs and CIOs and CISOs because you know PCI. But PCI-Ps don't do formal assessments. And because I was an ISA for so long, I was grandfathered into the PCI-P program. So when I left, the ISA is the credential that you can't take with you. But I have all my knowledge, so it's just like, whatever. Can't take that away from me. I know how to assess. So and so does Lisa. Lisa knows how to assess. We can tell you if you have a gap. And as a PCI-P, I can come in and I can gap assess you to the cows come home. I can tell you what you need to do and have in place before a QSA comes in and assesses you. So we're not as expensive as QSA firms. So it's always good to have another set of eyes to come in and gap assess you, right? And then have your QSA come in and assess you.
I like that.
I do too.
Yeah, but so I'm going to be straight up honest. I had a master's degree. I was a former CISP. When I hired into my role, It was with the understanding that I would get my CISA and my ISA certifications. My company paid for all that.
That's what I'm saying.
Let the company pay for it. I agree with that.
Yeah, 100.
If they want you to be an ISA, they have to sponsor you. They have no, you can't just go off and get your ISA on your own, and you can't just go and become a QSA on your own. You have to work for a sponsoring company.
I like that. Michael's asking a question that I think relates to this. He's saying, "What are the basic IT knowledge? What is basic? What?
I got it.
Okay, thank you. IT knowledge you must have to be an ISA
here, and I'm going to get on my soapbox here, and I know.
Get on it.
I want to hear it.
You want to hear it? All right.
I do.
So contrary to popular belief, you need to know enough in IT security. There are 12 domains, 12 requirement areas in PCI. How can you do assessment work if you don't know what you're assessing? If you don't know a good firewall rule from a bad firewall rule, you have no business thinking you're going to be a PCI ISA. As a matter of fact, when you go out and you look at the PCI ISA and the QSA qualifications and the eligibility requirements, you can find them. I have posted these documents on LinkedIn. Just go out to the Security Council's website.
If you're in my Discord, I put them in there too.
Yeah, go out to the PCI Council's website. They have the qualification and the eligibility requirements. As a QSA, you need to have 5 years of IT security / cybersecurity. If you're a cybersecurity, you're just using a marketing term. You need to have 5 years of experience. You also need to have one certificate or one certification in audit, and it can be a CISA, and I think there's one other one in auditing that you can have. And you also need to have an IT security certification. So that's either your CISM or your CISP. So in addition to having 5 years of experience, you need to have 2 other certifications to be a QSA, period. Those are the requirements. They're required. Mm-hmm. If you're a new QSA, you have to work with a lead QSA for 2 years before you can become a QSA. So you're an AQSA first. Okay, you're an associate. I think that's what that means.
Yeah,
the associate
you're right.
QSA.
Yep.
Now, for an ISA, you are required to have at least 5 years of experience in IT security. Again, how can you be a good ISA if you have no experience in IT security? That's my question to you. How are you going to assess the log evidence before you hand it over to a QSA? How are you going to assess your anti-malware requirements, your intrusion detection requirements? How are you going to assess your vulnerability management program? You have to have an IT security background. I came with 25 years of IT security project management.
Was that enough to qualify? I'm sorry, let me rephrase that.
That was enough to qualify me.
I apologize. I didn't mean it like that. Was that enough to satiate the council's requirement for that?
25 years.
You're just saying that I was 25 years.
No, I had 25 years of experience. Lisa had 25 years of experience. She had it in combination of, she was an underwriter, insurance underwriter. She worked in IT audit. She worked in IT security. She worked on both the business side and the corporate side. She came with all of the experience.
But for quantifying that for the council's requirement on attaining the certification,
you need 5 years.
But do you just give that to, is it, you just check a box?
I have 5 years of experience, or
you have 5 years. So first, you are being sponsored in by your company.
Right.
So yes, there is you kind of submit your resume with it too. It's like getting your CISA. You submit your resume and you have to get, so I also have my CISA. So I also had to get sign off and corroborate experience.
Okay. Okay.
So
I
this is
appreciate
contrary to popular opinion that you don't need to know IT security to get into PCI. I'm going to be the one who tells you, yes, you do. Yes, you do.
it. Okay.
You do.
Okay.
And
We can keep going on that one, but I'm going to stop it there.
yeah, PCI-Ps need 2 years.
Okay.
Say that one more time.
PCI-Ps need 2 years of IT security experience.
Okay. Okay. And okay. Oh, real quick. So PCI-P, you can get that on your own, not sponsored by a company.
Correct.
ISA and QSAs, you have to have sponsorship from certain organizations, right? QSA, you need one with a QSA firm, kind of like
QSA company,
lawyer.
and then you have to be working either for a merchant or a service provider for your ISA.
Oh, a merchant or a service provider. So not just any organization either.
No.
Okay.
You actually have to be a merchant.
Yeah.
Why,
I didn't
if
know
you're
that.
not a merchant, why would you need an ISA?
Okay.
Or a service provider? You could be a company that is providing services like descoping services, or all you do is hosted payment pages, but you're not the merchant, but you have the hosted payment page.
Yeah. Okay. Man,
I have a lot to research.
What'd you say, Janae?
I feel like I have a lot to research. That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing is I'm like, man, I feel like I do research, but there's some stuff that's not out there, which again, I'm going back to the beginning. This is the whole reason why I want to contribute to the community.
Yeah.
It's because I
feel
like
that's why I keep trying to combat some of the disinformation that's out there. And it's not my opinion, it's fact. You can go look at the eligibility requirements with your own 2 eyes.
And I feel like there's some of the stuff I just miss sometimes and somewhere, and you don't know what to look for all the time either, right? You think you do. Like from the beginning, I believe you could just get QSA certification. My understanding keeps increasing every time I talk with someone who knows what they're talking about, and it's like, wait a minute. So then there's this, and now there's this, and then there's this, and like I've learned several things tonight again about it, and I'm like, anyway.
So a couple of points that I want to make, because you need additional certifications to be a QSA. You also have to look at what those additional certification eligibility requirements are. To be a CISA, you need 5 years of experience, and you can substitute a bachelor's degree for 2 years worth of experience.
So then you still need 3 years of
You still need 3 years of it. And that's just the CISA.
Right.
The CISP, if you're going for your CISP, you have to have 5 years of experience. And I do think there's an education swap out, but I'm not exactly sure how many years it is.
And this is where people have a hard time breaking into technology, right? Is in order to get this, you need to have experience. No one wants to give you experience because you don't have
my advice, to be honest with you, is you're not going to break in to PCI. You need to walk through the front door and get your IT security experience. And for many people, it's going to be, you're going to start out at the ground floor if you're trying to change careers, or if you're just starting out after college. If you're in college, get internships. Go find those companies that have a strong internship program. I can't tell you how many great interns we met at our former company that are working full time. I'm watching somebody who was one of our interns in the compliance team who is now like a senior product manager in the compliance team. I'm just watching her grow. Because she started as an intern.
That's so amazing.
I love
that's one of my things too, Peggy. I shared with Peggy and Janae both. They both know, like, one of my dreams was to be able to, I want to get into this field, and I want to be able to put myself in a position where I can raise others up as well and help others and see them grow. And I do get this deep satisfaction and joy out of encouraging others and shining spotlight on other people. And don't get me wrong, it's not that I don't want to succeed myself. I do wholeheartedly plan on succeeding in the areas that I choose. But I feel like I also can help others achieve success, and that's what I want to do. So when you talk about the interns and seeing them and stuff like that, I'm like,
no, seeing them grow is just amazing. So if you are like in college, find a really good company that has a rock solid internship program, and there are lots of companies out there with them.
Okay.
So, and Chris, you answered Chris's question just a minute ago.
Yes, work in IT first.
Yes.
Again, how are you going to assess firewall rule sets if you don't know what you're looking at?
I've had that question myself, so good to hear someone else say that. Awesome.
So I think if you were gonna like break in, right, and this is like kind of my advice, so just take it for what it's worth, and you all might hate me after I say this, but get your foot in the door in IT security and then start volunteering around the PCI compliance program if you're working at a merchant. So say you have an IT support role, something or rather at a large retailer, all right? You can start volunteering. Nobody wants to do PCI except weird ISA people.
Yeah, like where can I help? What can I do?
Where can
that
you
makes
help?
me feel good. It makes me feel good. I'm on the right track then, because I'm like, oh, that's my future title. I realize that. Now.
Nobody wants to do PCI. Seriously, even help desk people don't really want to do PCI. But if you're working the help desk, or on a support team, or you're working as a level 1 analyst in the security operations center, where can you help out with PCI? Because I will tell you, if you're working at a merchant that has a security operations center, they are overwhelmed with the amount of alerts that they're getting for PCI compliance. Help them learn there, then start working your way in and get that experience.
I like that. Great advice.
Yeah, I'm so yeah, it is a big truth bomb, and it's. And if you don't believe me,
here's the thing I think to that. Like, I'm not trying to soften Peggy's blow, everyone, or anything like that, because I think we need that reality check at times. We need to know, because having an unrealistic expectation on something and then investing so much of anything, whether it be time, effort, energy, all that stuff. Yes, investing so much into something that we don't know. Like, we're hearing it right here. We're hearing it here, right? And there could be different opinions. I understand that. There can be different opinions. It's so easy for me to say this, right? Because I myself have had 20 years of IT experience. I've got that background. So
yeah, you do.
When I see logs and I hear firewall, you know what I mean? It's not like, oh, those are not foreign terms. So I can't understand, but I can sympathize, because if it was a completely different field, then I would kind of be like, what are we just talking? If I was like going into real estate, I'm sure there's going to be stuff dropped and I'm just like,
I'm not going to be an accountant anytime soon. I don't have the experience.
Yeah.
Or even the desire, but that's a good example.
But I do believe in the human capacity to achieve great things, given the correct motivation and honestly the circumstances. You can call those circumstances chance, luck, whatever you want to say, they exist. I would say not so much as this should deter you, but this should show you how to approach monumental it. Yeah, like, this is worth, like, if you're willing to put that work in, you're good. I feel like there's something to be gained out of it, right? Sure. There's something to be gained out of this, but nothing worth gaining is achieved easily.
Yeah.
Right.
I also believe in that, and it does take hard work. And so when I hear that, it's kind of like when I hear people who tell me about sicknesses, right? They're sick, they're scared of the doctor and stuff like that. And I'm like, I get it. But you know what? You're doing too much when you don't even have a diagnosis yet. Let's wait and see what's said. And then they get a diagnosis, and I get feeling that little stomach punch right there from it. But I'm like, look, here's the good news: is usually when you get a diagnosis, that means they've labeled it, they've called it something, and they have ways to battle it.
That you can take.
Yes, there's steps, Peggy, and that's kind of what you've done. Is like, you're like, so the answer, it may not be as popular as you want it to be sometimes.
It's not a popular answer.
but there is an
And it's
answer
not even
for
my
it.
opinion. It's fact. So you go out and look at the eligibility requirements to be a PCI-P, a PCI-ISA, or a QSA. It's all right there in black and white. And I don't make the rules. The PCI Security Council does.
So Lisa's saying over here, I didn't have an ISA certification, but I did have IT experience. That is how I got my foot into the door of PCI and was hired to stand up a sustainability program.
Yeah, it's because she had more than just IT experience. She also had audit experience. She had a lot of, because she had worked at the company for so long, at that point it was like 30 years, she knew the ins and outs of the company itself. So the business side, the IT side, the hosting side, she knew that company inside out and back. She knew it better than I did.
But see, when I hear that too, Peggy, I think sometimes you may also have that experience and not realize it. Like if you work at a bank,
I had only been when I started, I had literally only been at the company for 11 months. I started as a contractor.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah,
but and I'm not meaning Lisa specifically,
for like 30
but I mean
years.
like other people may have knowledge they don't realize can relate to this, right? Like, so don't sell yourself short just because you're hearing this message and think, oh, it's not me automatically. Don't be easily defeated like that. Okay.
Cross-reference and go.
So there's a couple of gotchas, right? If you're trying to transition, like say from the hospitality industry into PCI, get your IT security experience first.
Right.
And you know, it's so funny you're saying the experience part though, because I feel like that's the key word in this last piece that we're talking about is the experience part. I tell people, I was speaking to someone this weekend. We're like, because they asked the same question, how do I get into IT? I said, I'll give you my observations of what I've helped people do and get into it. I'm like, there's three things. It's there is education. So, you know, if you've got a degree of some kind, there are certifications, and then there's experience. And in my observations in the IT field, experience is key and trumps all the rest.
So I'm going to give everybody a little bit of a homework assignment before we sign off for tonight.
Okay.
Now, I have done this in my pivoting into PCI compliance on-demand workshop. I think I retitled it, and I'm trying to remember what I retitled it to. But anyway, there's a little homework assignment there's a homework assignment. You need to go out and do a job search and look up PCI compliance analyst.
Right.
One, there's lots of jobs, but you need to go read the job descriptions.
Okay.
And it will tell you, every single one I've read, you need to have at least 5 years of experience.
Okay. I'm doing it.
Right. Go read
in the notes,
the job
everyone.
descriptions.
I'm realizing that only YouTuber, if you're watching from YouTube, you see the comments that I post. So for those of you in LinkedIn, you don't see those, but I just put that homework assignment in there. Oh, I can actually throw it up here. So that's what I put.
Do a job search and look for PCI compliance analyst. Now, there's other types of roles that may have a segue into PCI compliance. A billing analyst.
Okay.
Got it.
That's also a great place to look for work, or look for a way to transition into PCI compliance is through finance.
That's a good point.
Did you post that article up, Peggy, where someone was talking about an accountant, I think, or a CPA?
Yeah, it was in finance. It was team finance. So you have to think, who owns the relationship with the acquiring bank? It's not IT. Right. It's not GRC. It's not cybersecurity. Who owns a relationship with your acquirer?
Finance department.
It's usually the finance department.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah. That's who gets the merchant ID. Huh. So look for positions in finance.
Okay.
They may not be IT security, but that might get your foot in the door.
Right. It all connects.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Huh. That's great.
Yeah. Exactly. Billing analyst, financial analyst. I mean, I don't do numbers. I do IT security. So that's why I went into PCI.
All right, everyone. I'm going to give Peggy the screen for a few seconds here so that she can give her final not final, but tonight's ending message, and then we're gonna bid her farewell, and then Peggy, you're just gonna hang out in the background for a minute, and then after that, we're gonna just say some ending notes for everything. But here you go, Peggy.
All right, everybody. Again, I'm Peggy Nolan, CEO of Payment Card Assessments. You can find us at paymentcardassessments.com. We are not QSAs. We are here to help merchants become PCI compliant in a much easier, smoother, faster, more doable, sustainable way. We do have a resource center for PCI, people who work in PCI or want to work in PCI. All of what I am teaching here that you're seeing now is inside our resource center. In addition to courses with video, you get quizzes. We also have all kinds of documentation. I have guidebooks, we have checklists, and coming within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we have another course dropping. We're doing one on log management. Our newest course that is available right now, we have 7 or 8 courses, I think. The latest one that dropped is on vulnerability management. So we cover requirements 2, 6, and 11, where it ties in to vulnerability management. Oh, also 5. So you can find us. We're here to help. We do have coaching available as well, but I do have a little caveat on coaching. You do need to be working in a PCI compliance role. Maybe you're a brand new PCI-P, a brand new ISA, or even if you're a brand new AQSA, but you want to have somebody coach you that isn't on the inside of the merchant, but somebody on the outside who has the in the trenches experience as an ISA. So we do have 2 different coaching packages available. We also have a 5-hour consulting block of time that's available, and that is for you to use to work with us as a partner and see if you want to work with Payment Card Assessments and to make sure we're a good fit. So we have a 5-hour block of time for consulting. It's kind of like try it before you have us come in and do a full-fledged gap assessment or something like that. But other than that, thanks. And I know I'll be back on here, but for the next 2 Wednesdays, I have family coming in. So I'll see you sometime in August.
Thank you so much for that, Peggy. I appreciate you. I hope you have a wonderful time with your family, visiting, and just love up on all that. You continually drop knowledge for us, and I appreciate the pieces that you're helping to contribute to the community outside, not just with your website and your awesome LinkedIn posts and everything else, but coming on here with us and encouraging and inspiring us as well. So thank you.
I enjoy it. This is fun.
I'm glad you enjoy it. I'm glad. Yeah. Okay, so we are going to put you in the green room. If you can hang out there, you can go get a drink of water or whatever else. We'll end the show in a minute and come back to chat for just a couple seconds, okay?
Okay.
Thanks, Peggy. That was fantastic.
Yes, lots of information. I thought it was good, for sure.
That was a lot. And
I know.
Not overwhelming, but just like, it's like, I feel like little fireworks are going off in my head. I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to do this. I need to do that. I need to look into this. I need to, you know what I mean?
I have a lot to think on and just, great stuff. I'm glad.
How are you feeling though? Because
good. I'm feeling good.
Good.
Yeah. It can be overwhelming, but I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you coming on. So it sounds like next week Peggy won't be here for the next 2 weeks, and great for her to spend time with family. And I don't want her to burn out here, but I know that we could continually just eat up her time and talk more and get stuff. I love the practical pieces that she brings. And so, but with that said, I'm always open and willing to hearing from other professionals. And I did ask Lisa on the show, and I don't want to put her on the spot, but I'll reach out to her separately so that she can make sure, we can clear her schedule and see if she wants to come on. But I want to know more about what did she say? Continuing compliance, I think, something like that.
Yeah, the continuing, something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was, something about that, compliance
continuity, maybe?
I was thinking continuity, but I don't think that was it.
Yeah.
Basically just, I think, maintaining compliance throughout the year and not one time a year. So I think her role was, so.
What was one of your big takeaways tonight, Janae? I just want to ask.
Let me think about that. I had lots of big takeaways. I'm going to say, man, it's hard to pick one.
It doesn't have to be the big one for you, but just with one that you want to share with the community watching before we leave.
I think that it would be, I feel more concrete in where I feel I want to go in my role within PCI, and that is definitely more of helping the companies stay compliant, like the continuation of compliance, I think is where my heart is. And I think
Yeah,
that's
she's like compliance sustainability.
I think that is where I find that my niche would be, because that's where I feel driven to. So I think that just concreted it for me, hearing what Peggy had to say. So what about you?
I think I'll take from your page in that. For me, it was, I don't remember how she said it, but I was thinking, oh, so my future role is an ISA. Okay, now that I understand what that does better, I feel like that's definitely going to align more to my skill set, And so I would like to be that person who helps, the go-between or buffer. I think that's what she said, right? She said buffer. I'd like to be the buffer between the company and the QSA for the organization. So
I'm already the buffer in my own house anyway, between my daughter and my husband. So I got lots of experience on buffing.
I appreciate that. I can respect that. So everyone, listen, come hang out with us next. Actually, we'll have to check with the schedule, but it will be next week. And then remember, in 2 weeks, Peggy will return. And so line up your questions. If you have ideas, let me know. If you have questions you want me to ask her when she's on the show, but you can also just show up live and just ask the questions during the show and we'll get them to her. Okay. And with that, everyone, you have an excellent night. Oh, real quick, I will be broadcasting. If you see on LinkedIn another show broadcasting tonight, I do have 2 shows. That other one is not a cybersecurity show. It is a variety show that I've been doing for several years with 2 funny friends of mine, and we shine the spotlight on people. There's the guy who I have coming on tonight actually is a fellow I met in PCI, and he just has crazy accolades to his name. So I'm going to interview him tonight if you want to stop in, but it is not a cybersecurity show tonight. So with that said, everyone, love you. Have a great night.